Alexander Kjerulf is the Chief Happiness Officer at Woohoo Inc., author of Happy Hour is 9 to 5, and one of the leading world figures in happiness at work. He'll be chatting with us about leadership and happiness in the workplace. Alexander Kjerulf.
Morning. It's great to be here. Thank you for that introduction, though I do have to gently correct the introduction. My company's not called Woohoo, it's called Woo! And we make people happy at work. Now, in September 1970, the New York Times published an article that contains possibly the dumbest and most damaging idea in business history ever. The article is by Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, and in this article he says that businesses should care about nothing but shareholder value. The only thing a business should ever focus on is maximizing profits and increasing returns for its shareholders. And this idea has been incredibly powerful and dominant in businesses ever since. Now, fortunately, that is changing. We speak all over the world in order to create more of a focus on happiness and happy leadership. And that's what I want to talk about today. How can we lead with happiness? Because the role of leaders is incredibly important in creating happy workplaces and a happier world. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are managers, bosses, leaders? Raise your hand if you're a manager, a boss, leader. Ooh, a lot of you. Then what I hope I can do in my speech here is give you some tips on how to be a happier leader. And this is incredibly important. We know that the manager accounts for at least 70% of the variance in engagement scores across business units. So if this team is really happy and this team is really unhappy, there's a very good chance that the difference in those two cases is the leader. And good leaders can create a lot of happiness. And what we also know is that happy employees do a much better job. When you are happy, you are more creative, you are more productive, you're more innovative, you work better with others, you communicate better, and you get much more work done. So even if we only cared about shareholder value, even if all we were focusing on was profits, we should still care about happiness, because happy companies make more money, and there's a ton of studies to prove that. So what I want to talk about here is happy leadership. How do we lead in a way that creates happiness? And I believe that happy leaders create happiness in 4 areas: for themselves, for their employees, for the customers, and for the community, the wider world. And I want to talk about each of those 4 areas. First of all, the leader herself or himself. It is incredibly important that the leader is happy, him or herself, because unhappy leaders ruin it for everybody. If you've ever worked for an unhappy leader, you know exactly what I mean. We know that emotions are contagious. We know that negative emotions are more contagious. And we know that the boss's emotions are the most contagious, because everybody's looking to the boss. Whatever the boss says or does is something the employees hear and see. So it's incredibly important that the manager can lead in a way that makes him or herself happy, that the manager is actually happy at work. I always think of Richard Branson as an example of a very successful business leader who is definitely very, very happy at work himself. Now, just out of curiosity, have you ever tried working for an unhappy boss? Anybody ever had an unhappy boss? Yeah. In that case, you know exactly how damaging that can be and how important it is to get out of there. And if you ever tried that, probably the only solution is to quit and get out of there. And that is why we have declared March 31st to be International Quit Your Crappy Job Day. It's coming up, 2 weeks away. There's a website, internationalquityourcrappyjobday.com. You can go on there and test yourself. Is it time to quit? You can get a lot of interesting tips on quitting and read stories from other great quitters who finally got out of their crappy jobs. Yeah. So happiness for the leader, him or herself. Then happiness for the employees. And this is something we focus on a lot, and something that more and more companies are wanting to do. Tomorrow I fly to Vietnam to do a workshop on leading with happiness. And I think one of the most important thing here is that we promote and train leaders for happiness. The next time, when this team needs a new manager, a new leader, pick the person who can make that team really happy. Don't just pick the most hard-nosed businessman. Don't just pick the one with the best professional skills. Pick the leader who will actually make that team really, really happy, because then that team will be really, really productive and create better results. And then we need to train leaders to do many of the small things that make us happy. Many of those small actions on a day-to-day basis, simple things like saying good morning to your employees, having time for your employees, helping them, seeing them, noticing them, praising their good work. All of those things are easily taught leadership skills that any manager should know, because that is how we make people happy at work. I kind of want to show you an example. Here's a video from one of our clients in Denmark. It's a company called Solar, where the two sales managers, they're called Karsten and Karsten. That's a very common name in Denmark. They wanted to make their employees happy, so one Monday morning, they're in the reception greeting every single employee like this. Normally there's sound on this video, but they're saying, good morning, welcome, let's have a great week together. There's a little plate of breakfast they can take up to their desk. Yeah, this is not something they normally do. This was very unexpected, as you can tell from that guy's face right there. Praise and recognition, positive feedback, just noticing people, just being there for your employees is incredibly important, and something leaders need to learn. And this is not something that is taught normally. If you take a business degree, if you take an MBA, this is not part of your training. I took a class on Coursera. Has anybody here ever taken a class on Coursera? Yes, Coursera is my new addiction. I've taken, 30, 40 classes on there. And I took one called Introduction to Business Strategy. And I've never been so unspeakably depressed, because the whole class was all about creating shareholder value. That was all they focused on, maximizing profits. There was nothing on culture, nothing on happiness, nothing on anything positive except profits. And that is what we need to change. And specifically, we need leaders who are awesome at relationships. Those leaders who can connect with other people, who get other people, who understand other people, who can communicate well with others, who have high levels of empathy. Those are the leaders of the future. The leaders with awesome relationship skills. Incidentally, that's why I believe that that much more often than today, the leader of the future is a woman, because women in general have better relationship skills. Just a fact. And this is the essential skill for a leader of the future. I believe that you should not be allowed to lead people if you don't like people. It is that simple. It is that simple. So helping your employees do great work, telling them that they do great work, and building relationships with your people so they feel like they belong. They feel seen. They feel valued. That is what leaders must do in the future. What about the customer? There's a fundamental reshift, I think, from thinking that we need, the role of the company is to, get as much money out of the customer as possible, to saying the role of the company is to make the customer happy. This is from IKEA. And at IKEA, umbrellas are actually cheaper when it rains. There is a sunshine price and a rainy day price. And if your mission was to get as much money out of your customers as possible, when it rained, you would raise the price of umbrellas, right? But at IKEA, they're all about making people happy, making the customers happy. So what they do is they lower the price of umbrellas when it rains. The mission of IKEA, the whole company's mission statement, is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And this is just one way they do that. So focusing on making the customer happy, not just making as much money as we can off of the customer, that is another fundamental rethinking that we need in leadership and in business. And finally, the community, the wider world. I believe that a business can have an incredibly positive influence on the community, on the wider world, on the environment. In fact, I believe that if you can't run your business in a way that has a net positive influence on society or the community or the world, you shouldn't run that business. And more companies are doing that. I think Patagonia is a great example of a company that really focuses on improving the environment. One of my favorite examples is another Danish company, and they have a rather unfortunate name. Oh, there. Yes, you may laugh, but there is in fact a town in Denmark called Middelfart. I used to live in Middelfart. Middelfart is a lovely place, okay? And this bank, the Middelfart Savings Bank, they are all about improving the local community where they're based. They're actually the happiest workplace in Denmark. I don't know if you know this, but Denmark has the happiest employees in the world, and this is the happiest workplace in Denmark. They're amazing. They are so cool. A really happy workplace for the last 25 years. And one thing they do is they really focus on improving the community. So my favorite story about them is that a few years ago during the financial crisis, all of the other banks in Denmark had recommended a lot of really risky investments, and their customers had lost, millions of kroner in those risky investments. Now, this bank, the Middelfart Bank, they were very conservative. They didn't recommend any of those investments, except one. There was one that they went ahead and recommended to their customers, and a lot of their customers lost a lot of money on that. Now, they have no legal obligation to do anything about that, and none of the other banks in Denmark did. All the other banks were like, you lost money? Too bad. Caveat emptor. It was our recommendation, but you made the choice. Too bad. But they actually felt, you know what, we made the recommendation. We have a responsibility to our community. We have a responsibility to the world. We are actually going to buy back those investments at the original price. So none of their customers actually lost any money on that investment. That ended up, thank you. On behalf of Middelfart Bank, I accept. They are awesome. It ended up costing them a lot of money. They're not a big bank. They only have 250 employees. But first of all, they did the right thing for the customers, made them very happy. And secondly, it made their employees proud. Their employees can say, I work for a company that does the right thing, even when it costs the bank money. So that fundamental rethinking of leadership and business, to say that business is not just about making more money. It is about creating happiness for the leader, him or herself, for the employees, for the customer, and for the wider world. I think that is what we need. And we need this badly because there is a lot of unhappy leadership out there. We did a survey in 2015 of 700 people all over the world, 700 employees from companies all over the world, where we asked them about unhappiness at work. What makes you unhappy at work? One of the questions we asked was, how often do you have a really bad day at work? And 19% said every day or almost every day. Yeah, that's bad. And then we asked them, and what makes you unhappy at work? And the number one response was my boss. A lack of support and help from my boss. So we desperately need better managers, especially because the effects of bad management are very clearly known. And we know that bad leaders create fear, stress, they make their employees sick, they reduce their motivation, reduce their productivity. So we need happy leadership more than ever. And that is part of our mission, to create that all over the world. And here's a question that I often ask myself. If I go out into the street here and go up to a random stranger and punch them in the face, knock them to the floor, what'll happen? The police will come, they'll arrest me, I'll be put before a judge, I'll get a prison sentence, and I'll go to jail. What if I'm a bad leader? What if I'm the kind of manager who systematically, over a period of years, ruin my employees' health, their relationships, their careers, their self-confidence, their motivation? What if I'm responsible for one person after the other becoming sick or even dying? What will happen to me then? And the answer is that in many companies, I'll be promoted because that's the kind of leadership that they expect, the hard-nosed, business, profit-oriented leadership. So I think this is wrong. Happiness at work, happy leadership is not just a good idea because it increases profits. It's a good idea because bad leadership kills people, makes us sick, ruins our careers, ruins our relationships, and that is just not okay. that is ethically and morally wrong. So there are two kinds of arguments for happiness at work. One is sort of the utilitarian argument, the practical argument, it makes the company more successful, and the other one is the ethical argument. Unhappy leadership is simply wrong because it ruins people's lives. And that's not the way it should be. Good leaders, happy leaders, can have a profoundly positive impact on their employees. They can create happiness in their lives, can help them realize their full potential, can help them grow as people and professionals, and they can contribute to making a better world. That is what we need. Thank you.